We're talking Ohio State football here on the Ourlads Football Network, Ourlads Football YouTube channel. And that means Kevin Noon from BuckeyeHuddle.com is joining us once again. Kevin, thanks for doing this.
Absolutely.
All right, Kevin. So we haven't talked since the Michigan game, so there's a little bit to talk about there. And then, of course, the game coming up this week, or next week, I should say, when the Ohio State Buckeyes host Tennessee. The winner will go to Oregon to face the Ducks. So talk a little bit about the aftermath. I know it's been a little while. Pretty much anybody that's watching this video understands exactly what happened. We don't need to go into it, but it's been over a week. So has anything calmed down at all? Is it still fiery? There's another game that's important to note. There's still a chance to win a championship. How are the fans reacting at this point?
I think there's a mix amongst the fans. I think some fans have allowed themselves to move on. Others have not. There are two temperatures when it comes to some Ohio State fans. We're going to win them all or we're going to lose them all. There's no middle ground whatsoever. And coming off of that Michigan game, we're going to lose them all is kind of where some people are. I mean, I think that fans are not looking past Tennessee and the success that Tennessee has had. I mean, I think that to the fans that are the most negative ones, they see Tennessee as this unbeatable force. But I think as we get a little bit closer to the game and with each passing day, people are starting to calm down a little bit and see that we're going to have what looks like a pretty good game here, 8 versus 9 in Columbus coming up here in a little less than 2 weeks.
Yeah. I don't look. I mean, I've been, and you, of course, I know you're more into the Big Ten, and that's what you have to do. I get an opportunity, just like you, to watch a lot of college football, and we know the SEC has been king for a while, but I think maybe what we saw last year when there was no SEC team in the championship game, and what's happening this year, more importantly, because of the transfer portal. This is just a different era now. And I know it's happened right. I know some people just can't get that in their head because it's happened so quickly. But I think the way some people are breaking down these teams and the strength of schedule and all this other stuff, especially with the SEC, games are not won on strength of schedule. Games are won by what do you think? You watch the game, you could tell whether or not this year's Georgia team, in my opinion, or this year's even Tennessee team from a couple years ago, I think they would have lost by 20, 30 points. They're just not as good. So, yeah, I think talking about this Tennessee matchup with Ohio State, I think it's all up here with Ohio State. Clearly, it's all up here. If they can get over this, I don't think there's any question of the better team.
Yeah, exactly. The transfer portal has created a lot more parity out there, and the SEC just isn't as strong. Apologies to Greg Sankey and everybody else out there. They're just not as strong as they were in previous years because of that parity, and you're just sometimes going to have shifts. It's just going to happen. It wasn't going to be like that. The SEC was going to be the most dominant conference for, from 15 years ago through perpetuity. Just not how it was going to work out. And you're right. I think there is a little bit of a mental block there, but I think that Ohio State's mental block is seeing Michigan. It's not about playing Tennessee or whatever. And people will be quick to point out Ryan Day's record against top 5, top 10 teams, but Ohio State went 2-1 against top 5 teams this year. So this team is plenty talented. Now there are some issues with this Ohio State team, some that have just always been there and some that have arisen recently. I mean, Ohio State's offensive line, they're on their 4th iteration of their line. They're down 2 starting linemen. Seth McLaughlin up for the Remington for the nation's top center. Josh Simmons, and a lot of people have him as a late first rounder. So, I mean, that is going to be an issue. But I think if Ohio State comes out and runs what Ohio State does well, they're going to be fine. But we'll see, because you don't know. We only know what the last bit that we've seen, and the last thing we saw of Ohio State was 13-10 to Michigan, where Ohio State is running the ball up the middle against two NFL defensive tackles, and that was maddening. And again, I still have not gotten any great answers as to if that was a Chip call, if that was a Ryan call, if that was a consensus call, but whatever it was the wrong call.
So, on that explanation that you haven't received, or even on the theory of what we heard was, okay, Ryan Day is now going to try. I guess I have to try to beat Michigan at Michigan's game. So we're not going to have the pocket passer McCord here. We're going to let him go, and we're going to bring in Howard because Howard is a multi-dimensional threat. And we're going to bring in another running back, another top NFL prospect. We already have one. Let's get a second one. We're going to try to play smash mouth running football. And it was almost like that. That to me, it seemed like it was obvious, right? Was that this is how we're going to try to beat Michigan. We have to do it. We have to outgain them on the ground because that's what the series says. And it just seemed like it was almost like that was just so built into Ryan Day's head that he wasn't going to change.
There, whether or not it was a stubbornness of, being called soft all these times and assembling these soft teams and, well, we'll show you we're going to win this game on the ground. And, I don't know. I can't get into Ryan's head on there. I mean, I think everybody on this beat has tried to become, Lucy from Peanuts, the 5-cent psychiatrist, of trying to figure out why Ohio State did what Ohio State did. Let's not forget that Will Howard got rocked on a pretty big hit, had to leave the game for a play, got evaluated, went to the injury tent. They took his helmet away for a little bit, and then they gave it back, and he went back out on the next offensive series. Was Will Howard right in the game? I mean, did they have to sit there and run it more because Will Howard was off? I mean, Will Howard does a lot of things well, but, he's in a school where you're looking at guys like C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields and guys like that here in recent memory. He probably doesn't have the arm talent of those guys, but, he is a more rounded player in terms of that run ability. But even after getting rocked, I mean, if you sit there and you have that read option, you may not be pulling it if you got hit and you got your soul jostled up when you got hit like the way that he did. So,
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, Ohio State also just did not do a very good job of protecting him down the stretch when it became very apparent that Ohio State was going to have to throw the ball to win. And even with all of that, Ohio State had a couple of bad drops along the way at the end of the game. Let's not forget, there are people that are trying to be critical of Ohio State's defense. We haven't talked about the defense, but just people in general. Ohio State gave up 13 points, and 10 of those points came on drives of 3 yards and 2 yards.
Yeah,
So
sure.
My biggest criticism of the Ohio State defense is in the fourth quarter in winning time, they couldn't get Michigan off the field. That's a problem. We talk about scoring, and obviously there's, I've never seen a game won on time of possession. But, Ohio State was not able to get that part done. If Ohio State has another bite at the apple or 2 more bites of the apple, we could be talking about a very different thing. And you and I may not be talking for another week or two until number 1 seed Ohio State knows who is playing in the Rose Bowl.
Talk about then recruiting. Have you noticed anything with big recruiting day, of course, a few days back? Have you noticed any recruiting shifts towards, well, because if it sounds like you want to try to play Michigan football, that means more offensive linemen, less top wide receivers, skill position guys, maybe more running backs. Have you seen any of those changes in the recruiting process?
No, because here's why. Ohio State desperately needs offensive linemen regardless of what scheme it's running. And Ohio State's offensive line recruiting has been mixed. I'm not going to sit there and say that they've gone out and gotten nobody. They can get some guys, but you lose a big recruiting battle to Tennessee on David Sanders. You lose, you're not able to go and get some of these top flight national names. Now, that doesn't mean Ohio State hasn't been able to get some solid guys. Carter Lowe out of Toledo. I mean, that was a huge get. But Ohio State still, it's not changing the way that it is going about looking at offensive linemen. It does have a 3 running back class, but there's going to be the necessity. Trevion Henderson running out of eligibility after this year. Quinshon Judkins would have 1 more year. I think it's unlikely that he would come back. So you've got you're the top of your running back chart for next year is James Peoples, who will be a true sophomore. Sam Williams-Dixon, who I believe still would fit as a red shirt, and then your incoming freshman at that point. I think it wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State went to the portal for another running back just to have somebody to kind of split the load with James Peoples next year. As for Ohio State changing its strategy recruiting wise, I think 11 games a year, Ohio State's still going to be a team that's probably 55-45 pass. I don't think that you're going to see Ohio State try to change what its strengths are. Ohio State maybe did not go out and get a Jeremiah Smith this year at wide receiver in recruiting. Jeremiah Smith is truly a generational type of player. We throw that term around a lot. Ohio State had a generational player in Joey Bosa, only to be followed up by his brother Nick Bosa, only to be
Yeah.
followed up by Chase Young.
Yeah, right.
Three in a generation. Hell, 3 in a decade is pretty damn impressive right there. So,
Yeah.
but Jeremiah is a generational player, maybe even further, even a further measure of time than a generation. So I think that sometimes just who you're able to land dictates who you land. In your Ohio State and you recruit nationally, but nobody, even the Alabama teams with Nick Saban, were able to go out and just select every person that they wanted. We always
Yeah.
joke that there's this line where you go from recruiting to selecting. I think if you talk to any recruiting coach, they'll be like, it never gets to that line. It never gets to the point to where we're truly selecting. So,
Yeah, right.
that's my 2 cents on that one.
Is the 2025 starting quarterback on the roster?
Maybe with Julian Sayin. I think that there's a debate whether or not Ohio State needs to go out and get a portal quarterback. We don't know how many quarterbacks may portal out of Ohio State. We know Devin Brown has already come out and said that he will be transferring, but he will stay with the team through the remainder of the season. Could Ohio State lose another one? Could Ohio State lose 2? I think losing 3 in total may be a reach, but I think it's very possible Ohio State loses a second guy. So, maybe Ohio State goes out and gets a veteran guy who is who is okay accepting a mentorship role of kind of mentoring Julian Sayin along. Ohio State is bringing in one of the nation's top quarterbacks in its recruiting class with Tavian St. Clair. Ohio State is not playing a true freshman quarterback for any significant amount of time, barring a lot of craziness happening. So
Yeah.
I think Sayin is kind of the future. I mean, the knock on Sayin is he's not the tallest kid out there. I mean, he's not your 6'4", 6'5" quarterback the way that Will Howard is this year, but he has plenty of arm talent. I think he's got the ability to do a lot of things. 25 really could be a rebuilding year for Ohio State. Now, when a lot of programs talk about rebuilding, you're like, well, maybe it's going to be 7-5. 7-5 never acceptable at Ohio State. Rebuilding year could be 10-2. So we'll kind of see on all of that. I mean, Ohio State could be very active in the portal, get a dozen players there, and be just as competitive next year as it's been in many years. I'm not going to compare it to this year, where Ohio State was supposed to be this super team, and we could go back and look at this in 40 days and be like, well, apparently they were, because they won the national championship. But there's a lot of football left to be played before we could have that conversation. But to the original point, I think that Ohio State's quarterback is on the roster with Sayin. I think there will be a lot of smoke out there about them going and getting a quarterback in the portal who might be a frontline starter, but do that at your own peril. You do that, you could chase Sayin off as well, and you could be looking at a quarterback room of that quarterback and Tavian St. Clair and everybody else leaving. At some point, you have to roll with what you recruit, or you just have to give up recruiting the position.
All right. So Ryan Day, what is your best guess on, from what you know, needs to happen, could happen, would happen? Let's just say we're talking in February. Is Ryan Day still the head coach of Ohio State, or does something need to happen in order for him to still be here?
I think it's more likely that Ryan Day leaves than Ryan Day is asked to leave. Is really where I believe that he pursues an NFL position or something along those lines. It's funny that being not that funny, but that a collegiate head coach seems to age at the same rate that a United States president does. You can just see it every 1 year is like 7 real years. It's a lot, and head coaching today in 2024 may be different than what it was in 2004, just in terms of being really truly the face of fundraising and NIL and all this other stuff. There are just so many demands that are not necessarily just drawing up X's and O's in the dirt and everything else. Even if Ohio State were to lose to Tennessee, I don't think that Ross Bjork, Ohio State's new athletic director, would make a change. But I think that we would go from this, this false narrative that Ryan's seat is getting warm to a true narrative of Ryan's seat is getting warm. People have asked me, how many games does he need to win to completely remove that narrative? My answer is 2. I think that if he wins this first round game and they can go to the Rose Bowl and beat Oregon, the traditional pinnacle of what the Big Ten season was supposed to be, a win in the Rose Bowl, I think that really takes any warmth out of the seat. Now they're going to be the anti-Ryan Day types who are going to say no, even if he wins the national championship, season's invalid, didn't beat Michigan, didn't beat the worst Michigan team that Ohio State's going to face in 4 generations or whatever. None of that matters to them, and that's fine. And they can vote with their wallet, and they can not go to games and everything else, and that's what they can do. But they don't have a direct line to Ross Bjork. I mean, it's Ross Bjork's decision. It's Ted Carter, university president's decision. It's the board of trustees' decisions. That's kind of where I see all of that. But I don't really see a scenario out. I guess if we're going to sit there and play scenarios that quite possibly maybe could happen in a parallel universe, if Ohio State comes out, looks disinterested and flat, and loses at home by multiple scores, 28 or something, I think some real talk would have to be had at that point.
Okay.
I don't see that scenario happening. We're still far enough out from the game that I'm hoping that I'm not going to have my feet put to the fire for a score prediction. Maybe I will. I don't know.
No.
I think that's the only way that we really see, we see DEFCON 1.
Makes sense. Yeah. That would be almost like too easy of a choice there at that point. If something like that would happen, but like you said, to even imagine that would happen, that would be really surprising. So you mentioned the possibility of Ryan Day taking a job. I think that was interesting that you said that. Does that mean that you think that even if he doesn't get a head coaching job, if he decides to leave Ohio State, he just might be, I just got to refresh my brain and let me just go somewhere and I'll take a job, even if as an offensive coordinator in the NFL, and then maybe just get the pressure off me for a year or two, and then maybe that'll give me a head coaching position in the NFL after that.
Potentially. I try to be careful with my words. I mean, you can sit there and talk to some people in my life who say I'm not very careful with my words, but I try to be careful with my words. I'm not going to say that it's limited 100% that it has to be a head coaching job. But then again, he sees Jim Harbaugh go and take a job with the Chargers and everything else. So, I think that would be an easier pill to swallow. I mean, in terms of going and probably making more money as an NFL head coach, you're not going to be making the same money you're making at Ohio State as an OC. But then again, you're also not going to be dealing with idiots posting your address online and stuff like that because of a loss and everything else. But his son RJ is still got a year or two left of high school. I don't think he would really wants to up and move him. As somebody who moved during their junior year of high school, I can tell you how bad that stinks. So I would not want to. And I certainly wasn't a good athlete. I was an athlete, but I was not a good one. So it's maybe
makes sense.
Maybe.
Okay. Give us some more on this game before I let you go. So I know it's only, we're recording this on Wednesday, the week before the game week. So we still got some time to take a look more at what Tennessee does. From what you have seen and what you have heard, what do you think the matchup, give me some matchup problems that you think is this so obvious? Or, well, they have to stop the run. Of course, let's just get away from that one.
Right.
But give me some others that you think might be an issue.
Ohio State has to stop the defensive pressure of Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee has just got a great pass rush, even though people don't really realize Ohio State has more sacks this year than Tennessee. Ohio State has recorded 35 sacks. Tennessee's recorded 29, but Tennessee has 93 TFLs. Ohio State has 78 TFLs. As I sit here with my little cheat sheet in front of me, I haven't written my big preview piece yet. That's coming at the end of this week. So I've got all of my numbers in front of me. But I think that being able to protect Will Howard is important, because Will Howard, with his 10 interceptions, obviously when he gets sped up, he doesn't always make the right decision, doesn't always make the right read. So what Tennessee is able to do with its rush, I mean, I think that James Pierce Jr. is obviously a problem. He is very much an Abdul Carter type of player for Penn State. I think that, and Ohio State did a pretty good job of protecting him, but Ohio State also, again, offensive line issues. I think we're going to see offensive line 5.0 in this game. I think we're going to see a new configuration. Who? I'm not sure. I think that we could see. I think we could see Josh Padilla move into center, and we move Carson Hinsman back out to guard. I mean, does it go just that far? Do we see an even bigger deviation? I don't know, but there's a lot of pressure on Ohio State to defend Will Howard, to slow down what they are able to do. So that is really kind of the biggest thing to me, is with what Ohio State is going to be able to do with that Tennessee pressure. I think on the other side of the ball, it's going to be Ohio State remembering that it has Jeremiah Smith. The last two games have been very quiet for Jeremiah Smith. There's been a debate out there whether or not he was a little more dinged up from the Northwestern game. He got his ankle twisted up pretty bad in a pile. Ohio State sent that play into the Big Ten. We never really did get any follow-up of anything came out of it. It looked like a dirty play to me, but I also know that in the pile, it's Lord of the Flies. Anything goes in the pile. But will he be able to find Jeremiah Smith? Everybody's like, well, Tennessee will bracket him. Well, then that means that Emeka Egbuka will have single coverage. That means that Carnell Tate will have single coverage. And I think it's also important that Ohio State is able to figure out who it is in the run game. And that all goes back to Ohio State's offensive line in a lot of regards, but the run game has been very pedestrian the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, even going back to Indiana, I mean, it was just kind of there. I mean, it wasn't even really worth mentioning. Ohio State is going to have to be able to run enough to keep Tennessee honest, in my opinion. But on the flip side, I think Ohio State, a lot of people want to sit there and say that Ohio State is a stock that is like completely falling, and that's fine. You can say whatever you want there, but I mean, Ohio State is still 17th in the nation in scoring offense, is still 38th in the nation in passing offense. I mean, and doing it against a pretty decent schedule. Again, as I said earlier, Ohio State has played 3 top 5 teams. Ohio State certainly, the Big Ten is not, 8 deep, but it's a zero-sum game. If you have 4 teams at the top of your conference that are winning all of your games, everybody else is losing games by result, because you can't sit there and have more wins than slots. I mean, so it's going to be a good game. I think Ohio State's going to be challenged. I think anybody who's expecting, a 15, 18, 20-point laugher in either direction is probably going to be disappointed. This is a game that feels like a one-possession game to me.
And and right now, I think Ohio State's a 7.5-point favorite. Tennessee's about a little bit over the 2 on the money line. But I do think if there is a 2-score win, I do believe it's going to be Ohio State in my mind. And I know everybody's already comparing what happened with Ohio State a couple years ago when they lost, and then they came back and they almost beat Georgia, and so they could do it again. But things are a little bit different. You can't I still think that comparison's a little off, but I can understand why people are doing it. But I do believe that they can come back from this, because there's just too much talent on the team. And I also look at this as Ohio State has a major advantage where they have an experienced quarterback against basically a redshirt freshman playing at Ohio State in the biggest game of his career. He's never played a game at Ohio State before. He has no idea what he's about to. I know he's played in the SEC before, but playing at Ohio State is also very different. And especially in a one and done situation, which nobody's ever played in this type of situation. You've played it with the semifinal playoff deals, but never in this environment before. So that's why I like Ohio State. I think if they lose, I think, like I said, I think it's all up here, and it just means that they just weren't able to just figure it out mentally. But there's just too much talent on the team. They're just more talented than Tennessee. Even before, everybody knew going into the season they were more talented than Tennessee. They're still more talented than Tennessee. Now they're at home. So again, I just think this all comes down to whether or not they're psychologically going to be in this game or not.
Yeah, Nico on the road has not been a great quarterback, at least not compared to what he's done at home. In road SEC games, 67 of 108 attempts, which is a 62% passer, 773 yards, which is 7.2 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Of those 5 touchdowns, 4 of them were in the Vandy game. So if you took Vandy off of the equation, he's really kind of been very middling on the road. In terms of on the ground, 37 carries for 98 yards, sacked 12 times. So obviously a lot of sack adjusted yardage right there. Even Dylan Sampson on the road has not been the same guy in SEC road games. 90 carries for 511 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's 127.8 per game, about 22 and a half carries per contest, and that even was a little bit stat inflated with Vanderbilt being a 178-yard game. So again, I've got all my numbers in front of me to write my piece. I've spent 3 days pulling every darn number I can find, and if it were only that simple, I'd be living in Vegas, drinking a Mai Tai right now, going to the sports book, collecting my money, and living my best life.
Well, look, I mean, it's interesting you bring that up because you look at it, they have only played 4 true road games. Oklahoma was one of them, but I mean, that was like their SEC opener. So in my mind, they're still a Big 12 team. Then you've got Arkansas, who they lost to, and then you have Georgia and Vanderbilt. So you mentioned Vanderbilt, like you said, draw a line through Vanderbilt, and you've got Oklahoma, Arkansas you lose to, Georgia you lose to. And by the way, I'm looking at the stats here. In the games against Arkansas and Georgia, those were his 2 worst yards per attempt games by far. He averaged 5.4 yards per attempt at Arkansas, 58.6%, 158 through the air, no touchdowns, no interceptions. At Georgia, 60%, 167 through the air, 5.1 yards per attempt, no touchdowns, no picks. So I'm sorry, but that's a huge difference. And again, now you're asking this kid and this team to go to Ohio State and do it and play their best football and do something they haven't done all season. And that's play a really good game on the road. I'm not saying it can't be done. We all know it can be done because the kid's talented. The team is a good team. They're in the SEC. We know all that. But the numbers and just the overall, again, you match these 2 teams up, and I honestly just don't think there is a big difference in me believing that Ohio State can't win or cover this game. And I think we'll find out early. I think we'll know early in the game because I don't see them kind of getting off to a slow start and then all of a sudden, we're just going to bust out in the second half. I think if they are in this game early and they come out of the chute early, they could take a quick score or 2 early. I think they might even, like I said, win the game by a couple scores.
Ohio State's a very slow starting team. I took the non-conference numbers out of both Ohio State and Tennessee for looking at their quarterly breakdown. Ohio State only has an 18-point advantage in the first quarter, 41-23, but Tennessee only has a 1-point advantage, 34-33. Ohio State's biggest quarter is the second quarter, where it's outscoring opponents in Big Ten play, 9 games versus Tennessee's 8 games, 105-46. Tennessee's best quarter is the third quarter, where it's outscoring teams 74-31. Tennessee actually has a deficit in the fourth quarter. It has been outscored 56-33, but Ohio State has only outscored opponents 37-36. You're talking about 2 teams that, though not necessarily dealing with a lot of cases of having to have a lot of high pressure fourth quarters. So it'll be interesting, but people are talking about Tennessee's scoring offense being this, that, and the other. I mean, if you take the 4 non-league games out, they're only averaging 25 points a game. I mean, in Ohio State, if you take its 3 non-conference opponents out, is averaging 30 points a game. So, right there, maybe I should pick Ohio State by 5. Maybe the numbers bode well or something. But that's where those stand at. And on the defensive side of those numbers, just conference games only, Ohio State is allowing a touchdown less than Tennessee.
All right. Well, I only think there's 6 teams that can win a national championship. I do not believe Tennessee is one of them. I do believe Ohio State is one of those 6. We'll see if they can get it done. I think if you're thinking of betting futures championships, I would take a look at it. I'm not, because the bottom line is at least you'll know pretty quickly, because if they can beat Tennessee, then I think that's a big help, no question, psychologically. But then you play Oregon. And I think everybody knows right now, after what they saw on Saturday night, that Oregon, they're the best team in college football, and they deserve to be. Doesn't mean they can't be beat, because they can. And if anybody can beat them, and if anybody knows they can beat them, it's the Ohio State Buckeyes, because they were right there. Probably should have won, but they made too many mistakes at the end of that game. And now they'll get a second chance if they can beat Tennessee. And then if you do that, then all of a sudden you're in the driver's seat. So
yeah, I saw a couple of future lines put out there, potential quarterfinal games. Ohio State, Oregon at the Rose Bowl. Ohio State would be a 1.5 point dog. So
wow.
And that's without the benefit of seeing the first round game. I mean, if Ohio State comes out and just torches Tennessee, I mean, maybe we see that number move. That wasn't necessarily from, I don't remember it being from a book. I think it was just from an odds maker out there. But if I sat there and told 50 people on the street that that's what the line is, I don't think anybody would disagree.
Well, I mean, Penn State was only a 3.5 point dog, and that was on a neutral field as well. And Penn State, really, if you match them up with Ohio State, a lot more people believe Ohio State's the better team. So I think that makes a lot of sense in a way. So yeah, there you go. And by the way, I really think, and it's kind of weird that you get a bye, and that's great, and you should want the bye, but it's kind of like, how do you not get a home game? It's like, isn't that what you want? Is a home game and all the revenue that comes in with that home playoff game? So I don't know. Maybe they should make some changes there and put the bowl game starting in the semis, like they did in the past, and then allow those bye teams to get a home game. So,
well, there's some issues though too. I mean, just in terms of, Columbus is the state capital of Ohio. There are a ton of hotels. I mean, I think that people are going to find out that there are not a lot of hotels in State College, Pennsylvania, and you're not going to be able to. You may be able to get into Altoona, maybe not. Whenever I go just to cover a normal Ohio State Penn State game, I have to stay in Bedford, which is 90 minutes away.
Okay.
At least it's in the right direction going back toward Ohio. But there's some travel considerations and everything else. And everybody's like, how did we get such a flawed, weird system? It's because you had to please 50 masters out there. You had to sit there and please all the conferences, including the group of 5. You had to please the bowl games. You had to please everybody. So if you take the quarters of the bowl games out of the quarters, you're going to have more bowl games than you're going to have slots to fill things in. I don't think you're going to see that. I think we are going to see an immediate course correction with reseeding. I think we're going to see immediate course correction of ranking 1 to 12 versus, this, how the buys are going to work out. I think you're still going to have to see the automatic berths though. But I mean, if you're the group of 5, I mean, and group of 5 broke the mold and was not the 12 at this point.
Yeah.
So, we're it's a work in progress. It's just year 1. We'll get there.
That's okay. I agree. And it's a lot better. That's all. I'm all for this. I know it's crazy this year and everything, but there's a lot of negatives with the transfer portal, but I love this type of football because anything can happen. I don't think there's going to be those dominant 3-year out of 4-year championship teams anymore. It's going to be almost impossible to do that. We're already seeing it this year, and we'll see if Ohio State. We'll see what kind of history Ohio State can continue to build here because they're still alive. And they still have a chance for a national championship in the first ever 12-team FBS playoffs. And that's all that matters, I guess, when it really comes down to it. So Kevin, I appreciate it. I'm going to have links in the description, by the way, of how you can connect with Kevin and his work, the content and so forth. You're going to have like an upcoming, like you just mentioned, you're going to have like an official preview video that's going to come out. And when will that be?
Well, I will probably do a video coming out of it. My written piece, which is an exclusive for members of Buckeye Huddle, will come out either Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. I just like to hold off on it and normally would run it on Tuesday or Wednesday of a game week. You want to make sure that nothing changes. You're not hearing about an injury or anything like that. But I would say a video a video piece with it would come out right around then. So Tuesday or Wednesday of game week, which would mean, I guess, the 17th or 18th of December.
Okay.
And follow me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. I will certainly tweet about it.
And we'll have a link in the description for that as well. Any video previews?
That'll probably be my big one, but we over on our Buckeye Huddle YouTube channel, we have so much content, and if it's not just from me, from Tom Moore and Tony Gerdeman as well, who cover the team for us, we pretty much have at least one video podcast a day. I mean, unfortunately, in this day and age that we live in, we can't do a true video breakdown the way that you would love to have it because of rights holders and everything else. But we've got this thing covered, every way possible.
Well, we'll have links in the description for that as well. So, Kevin, appreciate it. And if there's a win and the team moves on to face Oregon, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again. I'd really like that, and I appreciate it. You did a great job.
Anytime.
Thanks, Kevin.